Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a books beside my bed video for you and we're going to try and film this without me losing my voice. Not sure how successful we're going to be, but these are all the books plus a few others that I have read in the last 7 days and we are going to talk about them. Well, most of them. We're not going to talk about these three because they're coming up in a vlog. There is For Once in My Life by Carly Lane, Mr. Right Next Door by Katie Montanaro, and The Reality of Us by Emma Mugglestone. There's a vlog. It's coming. As for everything else that I read this week, I received a review copy of A Small Collection of Happiness by Zana Fraillon. This is her newest middle fiction release. It is coming out in the next week or so. And it is a very whimsical, gorgeous little story, sort of in the vein of Glenda Millard's Kingdom of Silk series. And I think she said that was one of the inspirations for this, which has a very cozy storytelling feel to it. This is the story of Hetty, who is a young girl who lives in I think it's like an apartment block or a series of apartments that are all connected. And one day, during a big summer storm that Hetty believes that she has summoned, Ada turns up, and Ada is Hetty's new next door neighbour. And she is a lot older and has come with a lot of life experiences. And at first they're kind of hesitant around each other, but then the rumours of a panther who is haunting the area where they live bring them closer together as they sort of begin to explore and unpack that mystery. And we learn a little bit about Ada's past and her connection to someone special. This is very queer coded without it being explicit on page. I don't know if that was intentional. I'm hoping it was because it was really, really gorgeous. It has chapters, but each chapter is sort of its own little mini story. So you could read one of these a night and be totally fine. And they're only a couple of pages long. There are also some really gorgeous little tiny illustrations throughout the book. Usually at the start of each chapter that sort of symbolize what's coming up in the story by Stephen Michael King. I had an absolutely delightful time reading this. Zana Fraillon is just a top-notch children's author for me. Whether it's her middle and young adult fiction or her picture books, she is just superb. And thank you very much to Hachette for sending me the review copy. Continuing in the vein of sort of middle fiction and young adult titles, I read Concrete Kids by Amyra Leone. This is a collection of poetry about various experiences growing up Black in the United States. It has themes of love and loss, growing up in Harlem in poverty, the foster care system, the resilience of growing up in that area. And it was just, I listened to this on audio, I got it out from Libby. It also had a really strong melody thread through it. And this was great because I was taking part in the Poetry Readathon 2024, which I'll talk about in a minute. So this kind of fit into that category, even though I read it a day early. But I really enjoyed it. I also read Other Words for Home by Jasmine Warga. Again, this was an audiobook that I had out on Libby. It is a middle fiction story about a Syrian girl who moves to the US with her mother to escape the unrest over there. And they end up staying with her uncle and his family. And it is about her going to school there, how she has trouble fitting in with people because they see her as other, how she faces racism, but also how the immigrant community around her also support her and others within the community. It was a really great audiobook, I highly recommend. And as I said, I was taking part in the Poetry Readathon 2024. This is hosted by Charlie Brooks Reads and Charles Heathcote. And when I heard about it, I'm like, great, I can totally participate in this because I've got a stack of poetry books and verse novels that I'm really interested in reading. So this is what we're going to talk about for the next little bit, and then I'll talk about the romance novels that I read. There is Footprints on the Moon by Lorraine Marwood. This is, I think it's technically a young adult verse novel, but I think it does sort of bridge that very late middle fiction readership as well. This is about Shani. It is 1969, and Australia is hearing about the Vietnam War. They're experiencing the anti-war protests, and alongside that you also have the space race and the moon landing taking place. Shani has just started high school and she is trying very hard to fit in but not being able to find her place. After the death of her grandmother, which takes place in the book, she is coming to form her own opinion on the war and really looking at both the pro and anti-war sides, and she starts to fall on the anti-war protesting side of things, but that is really looked down upon, and people who protest are facing quite an uphill battle. And her older sister is one of those people that is involved in those protests. Along the way, Shani meets and makes friends with another girl at school, and the two of them enter into this competition to create posters for the moon landing, and they find a way to twist the moon landing into a way of also protesting the war. That side of everything was really, really cool. It's also about family and differing opinions, dealing with the grief and loss of a grandparent who is someone that Shani was very, very close to. Shani's younger cousin is involved in this as well, and he is tiny and just that annoying cousin that's always under your feet, but occasionally says some really insightful things because young kids always say some very insightful things. There is so much going on in this book, and it was just so wonderful to read considering it is a verse novel, and I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed myself. I've enjoyed other work by Lorraine Marwood that I've read previously, and when I realized that she had a historical verse novel, like, Great, sign me up. Okay, then we come to a few more poetry collections that I read for the readathon. There was a bingo board. I was not taking part in the bingo board side of it. I just wanted to read what I actually already owned. So the first one is She's the Ocean. Full confession, editing Steph is having a really rough time with this video because the number of errors. I'm not doing well when I'm filming this. And I didn't even realize until I opened it up to edit it. So apologies. If the edits look rough, I mean, me calling this book She's the Ocean instead of She's the Earth is... that's interesting. By Ali Cobby Eckermann. I think I picked this one up in a bookstore because it was part of a long list for maybe for the Stella Prize, I can't remember. I don't think it was shortlisted, but I picked it up anyway. I really enjoyed exploring this one. Ali Cobby Eckermann is an Indigenous woman. So this is a verse novel and it explores loss and history and dreaming and was just a really interesting read. Again, new to me poet/author, so I was just really immersed in it, and I think she had a really interesting writing style. Then there is Chinese Fish by Grace Yi. This won the Victorian Premier's Literary Awards this year, I believe. And it is, again, a verse novel. And it is a family saga and the story of a few generations of immigrants from Hong Kong to New Zealand. And we follow a mother and a daughter, and then we have sort of interspersed some stories about other family members. And it is about the disconnect between a previous culture and a new one. It's about language barriers, it's about assimilation into a new culture, but also wanting to maintain your connection to who you were before. This one is a lot more dense, but it also plays around a lot with different forms. There is a really cool section which is literally just the same image repeated over and over again, and it proves a point. When I was exploring the Victorian Premier's Literary Awards shortlist, I saw this one and it came up, and I thought, if I find it in a bookstore, I'm going to pick it up and read it because this is very interesting. It's very different to what I normally read. So great, new perspective. And then the final poetry book that I read for this readathon, even though it's not finished, but I was just kind of doing a week's worth of reading, was More Than These Bones. And this collection really explores relationships, the highs and the absolute lows of relationships, the loss of a relationship, the feelings of instability and the self-doubt that you go through. It also touches on themes of self-harm, alcoholism, cheating on your partner as well, so be aware of those things going into it. But his writing was just beautiful. It was such an interesting collection to read, and interspersed with all of this. So it's broken up into various sections, and there are accompanying photographs to go with various poems and sections that really add to it because they are part of this story. It's based on, I believe, Bebe Blackhouse's life and his experiences through a relationship that was so important to him that fell apart. Again, very different to what I would normally read, and I thoroughly enjoyed exploring this. And as you can see, there were a few phrases and poems that really resonated with me, so we'll be going back to those at some point. Okay, and then the last two things that I read this week, Do Me a Favour by Cathy Yardley, which is her upcoming release that comes out in June, I believe, June or July. And while I didn't love this as much as role-playing, I still thoroughly enjoyed it. I find Cathy Yardley's writing to be very readable. I like her characters. I like the fact that she's writing about Gen X characters falling in love and being put in ridiculous situations and having to navigate that together. So this is the story of Hudson and Willa. Willa is a widow. Her husband had type 1 diabetes and died from complications of managing his diabetes. I will not speak to the representation of diabetes that is mentioned in the book. Her husband is never on page. He's already passed away at the start of the book. I know Robin mentioned that some of it is not entirely accurate, and that is totally fine. Okay, I'm just going to rephrase something because it didn't make sense. I was saying something along the lines of, I don't think this book is so much about how her husband dies as it is about how he was trying to outrun his illness and trying to squeeze everything he could into his life before it eventually killed him. So yes, we'll cut back to past me. When he is gone, Willa finds herself really in a rut. She is in a creative rut. She ghostwrites cookbooks. She's also a food scientist and is really passionate about creating great food, but she's in a huge rut. Her aunt has also died, and that has compounded the situation. And her aunt has left her estate and house, which is in a small town on an island, and she decides to move there. She is in a bit of financial trouble, but she has a deal to ghostwrite a cookbook for a sexy TikTok chef, and she thinks it's absolutely ridiculous, and she's struggling to come up with themes and concepts based around this character. And then she meets Hudson, who is her next door neighbor, and he is the island's handyman. He has raised his 2 children on the island after his wife left him when the twins were 3 years old, and he lives on the same property as his parents. His daughter lives there with them. They have like a hobby farm, and his daughter helps out there. His son also moves home during the course of it. So I do actually like that idea of family, and I also liked the exploration of Hudson's relationship with his ex-wife. But yes, Hudson and Willa end up, forming a connection, having a lot of fun. There's some really gorgeous and funny scenes. There's a scene where Willa accidentally gets high at their family party, and Hudson is just trying to take care of her and make sure she doesn't do anything silly. And then you also have a really awesome scene where they're dancing in the kitchen, and I loved it. It's one of those no stress kind of books. And yeah, as I said, I don't think it will ever hit the top tierness that role-playing was. And I think there would be very few things that would, because that book to me is just incredible. And also because in role-playing, for me, there was a connection with one of the characters and exploring their sexual identity and realizing things for the first time later in life. For me, there's always going to be that personal connection there. So I think it's really unfair to judge any of Cathy's books by that one, because I think every now and then an author just comes out with something truly, truly wonderful. I don't think they always have to keep hitting that, because there's actually nothing wrong with Do Me a Favour. I think it's a really solid book if you're just looking for something easy and comforting to read. I have no idea how coherent that is, because I kept having coughing fits in the middle of talking about it, so apologies. And then the final thing that I read this week was the bonus content from the Carolina Comet series. So Teagan Hunter just released an omnibus of all of the books in the Carolina Comet series, including a novella that had been previously written for a book event, and so that's come out in the collection. And also there's a bonus sort of Carolina Comets chat thread thing going on. So I read the bonus content for the series and I loved it. Teagan Hunter, top tier, like just great life choices all around by reading those. So the novella is called Game Changer. It is about, I think her name is Tessa, and she is the best friend of one of the social media managers for the Carolina Comets. Her friend drags her along to this event because she doesn't have a date and she just wants to take a friend with her. And while she's there, Tessa meets Ford, who is the newest transfer to the team. And the two just hit it off, they start flirting together, and then they spend the night together. It is very steamy. It does look a little bit at dominance and submission, and the fact that Ford is very much a dominant male, and Tessa, who is a romance book cover designer, is kind of in a relationship rut, and she's gotten out of a bad relationship. She's doubting herself, and he just thinks that she is hot and awesome and wants to make her feel good about herself. And I really enjoyed that. It was very, very short. It's not very long. It'd be less than 100 pages. I don't know exactly what the page count is, but it would be less than that. So great, very short, very steamy. A lot of fun. And then the chat thread was just hilarious because it's all of the characters from the Carolina Comet series talking, and basically Miller being a pain in the neck in the best possible way. I can't complain. I really enjoyed that. All right, so that is my wrap up for this week. In the comments, let me know if you've read any of these books or if you're planning on picking any of them up. Feel free to let me know down below. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you are in the world, just staying safe and healthy, and I'll see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.